Hi friends, welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Amanda, and in this week's video, I'm taking you through a week of what I fed my family. If you didn't know, I have a 4-year-old daughter as well as 2-year-old twins, and it can be difficult trying to find the time to make your family wholesome meals, especially when you have little ones running around. My goal is to inspire you to prioritize the time to make sure that you're able to feed your family the most wholesome ingredients and also create a delicious meal or snacks that your family can enjoy. Starting off this video with my weekly egg white bake, and I'm doing it a little bit differently this week by adding a cup of cottage cheese to my 3 cups of egg whites. And after blending that up, I am chopping up some ham that I had left over from last week. I'm just gonna add it into my egg white bake and then chop up some spinach. That will bake in the oven for about 25 to 30 minutes at 350 degrees. To add to my family's egg bake, they will usually have regular eggs while I have egg whites. I need to make some breakfast sausage, and this week I'm doing something a little different by using ground pork, and then I will season it so that it resembles a breakfast sausage. At the same time, I'm also starting an Italian sausage for tonight's dinner. So I have 2 pans of 1 pound ground sausage in each one, and I have a blend of seasonings that will be in my description box, and I'm just gonna cook that down until it's all brown. And then for the breakfast sausage, I am adding some maple syrup just to give it more of that breakfast flavor. When the pork is fully browned and cooked through, I'm gonna add that to my mixed up eggs. I usually use around 15 to 16 eggs, and I'm gonna add some salt, pepper, and break up some spinach. And this will also bake at 350 for about 30 minutes until it's completely solid and cooked through. While those egg bakes are going, I'm also going to get started on prepping tonight's dinner, and we are going to have like a spaghetti squash bake, so an alternative to just a regular pasta bake. And to do that, I'm getting my spaghetti squash ready here. I'm going to cut it down the middle and then chop off both ends. And once you scoop out those inner seeds, all you have to do is lay this on a baking sheet and drizzle with some olive oil and salt and pepper. And then you'll bake this at 400 for about 25 minutes. You just want it to be tender enough that when you stick a fork in it, these sides will start to pull in and look like spaghetti noodles. It is much later in the day, probably around 5:30, and we are getting ready to finish off dinner. For our sauce base, I'm using just a jar of pre-made marinara, and then I'm gonna add about a 1/2 cup of cottage cheese. This is simply just to add a little bit more protein. So I'm adding 3 eggs here, and I'm gonna use my immersion blender just to bring all of this together and to also smooth out the cottage cheese. Now it's time for the fun part, and we're gonna go ahead and pull out the noodles, if you will, from the spaghetti squash. And my spaghetti squash is completely cooled down at this, so I'm able to touch this with a bare hand. And we're just gonna add this to our sauce mixture. I definitely used too small of a bowl, so I'm gonna transfer this to a bigger bowl and mix everything together. As I mentioned, I do have little ones running around, so some of the best ways I'm able to prepare meals like this is just getting them involved. Sometimes it can be a little frustrating. However, it's the only way that I can really get a good meal in the oven. And plus, I think it's helpful for them to learn how food is made and where it comes from. So I am grateful that they enjoy and are interested in this process. I did add in my Italian sausage that we were working on earlier in the day and gave that a good mix. Once everything is thoroughly mixed through, we're adding it to a baking sheet, and then you'll top it with cheese. I happen to be out of a regular mozzarella block, so I am using string cheese and just cutting this up into chunks, and I'll top it off. You're gonna bake this at 375. Depending on what size baking dish will depend on your timing. I used a 9x9 and it took almost 45 minutes. So I would suggest using a 9x13, and you'll probably have this done in about 35 to 30 minutes. It is the next day and we are getting started on some granola bars. These are a no bake recipe, but I did start cooking down some maple syrup and peanut butter. That is going to be our base that holds everything together. I'm also adding some oats, and I'm using Wheaties for some crunch. You could definitely use Rice Krispies here. I just had them and thought I would give it a try. And then I'm also adding in some chia seeds and flaxseed for some extra nutrients. Once we've added everything, we will give it a good stir. And I like to add these to a bread loaf pan that are lined with parchment paper and just press it all down so that it's firm. I'll even use my second loaf pan here just so that I can evenly disperse the pressure and get it nice and compact. These will then go in the freezer for 30 minutes or in the fridge for 1 to 2 hours. Then you can cut them up and individually wrap them and store them for the week. We had a busy day today, so I am using a meal that I had prepped in the freezer a few weeks ago, and that's our hamburger patties. I will leave what I did for the patties in the description box, but to go with our cheeseburgers that we're gonna grill, I'm making some french fries using golden potatoes. After chopping those up into french fries size, I'm gonna wash them off and dry them so that we can add them to a bowl, drizzle on some olive oil and salt and pepper. These are gonna go in my air fryer and we will cook them for about 20 minutes and giving a good shake to the pan halfway through. To ensure I get a well-balanced meal for my family, I always like to have a protein source, a carb source, and some type of veggie. So tonight's veggie is gonna be Brussels sprouts. I have been loving this version where I obviously prep them and wash them. Before putting them in the oven, I'm going to season them with salt, pepper, and some garlic powder. What really takes this version of Brussels sprouts to the next level is when you pull them out of the oven, I like to drizzle some hot honey over them. There's just something nice about kind of like the bitterness of the Brussels sprout and the sweetness and a little bit of the kick from the hot honey. On a crazy weeknight, it is so nice to have something frozen and ready, just like I had these sourdough hamburger buns. That way it makes it super easy to have a nice fresh meal that I didn't have to prep today. Our next dinner is going to be a white chicken chili, and it's going to be made in the crock pot. I am so excited for fall because you can really lean into these hearty, warm crock pot meals. The crock pot became my best friend last year, and I'm so excited to welcome her back for the cool seasons ahead. I will leave the link for this specific recipe. This was just phenomenal. I highly recommend. This is my favorite white chicken chili recipe I've ever had, and would love for you to give this one a try. The beautiful thing about crock pot meals is that you can get this started earlier in the day, and that way you're not making a full meal literally in the last few minutes before dinner time. I don't know about you, but I find dinner time the most stressful because everybody is hungry. My husband's usually not home yet, and it's just the end of the day, so everyone's kind of at their wits' end. So instead of making a full meal, I am just gonna make my side dishes at this point, and we are making some homemade cornbread muffins. I'm just using the recipe on the back of this Kroger cornmeal, and it turned out pretty well. I followed everything except I did add honey instead of sugar, and my daughter helped me make this and mix it, and they were really good. It went great with the chili. It is the next day, and I am getting started on a roast chicken. I am blending up some spices. This recipe is from a meal prep cookbook called Skinny Taste, and this is my go-to recipe for a roast chicken. This is going to be more of a multi-purpose food, not necessarily a meal. I just want to have some chicken available going into the weekend so that I can use it when we're low on leftovers, or for dinner if I need something quick. I can throw it onto a flatbread, something like that. But having a roast chicken is such an economical way of getting a protein source because it is pretty cheap and you get quite a bit of chicken and you can use it for so many things. The chicken is going to sit in the fridge for at least an hour. So while we're waiting on that, I'm going to get started on tonight's dinner. We are doing a chuck roast in the crock pot. So I'm going to get my seasonings mixed up here. I'm using 2 tablespoons of steak seasoning and about a tablespoon of thyme. I will then put this over the meat, but I'm going to season a cast iron with about a tablespoon or 2 of olive oil. Then press in those seasonings onto one side of the chuck roast. When you've used about half of it, that's when you'll put the seasoned side down onto the preheated cast iron, and you'll use the remaining seasonings for the other side. Before adding our chuck roast to the crock pot, we want to sear both sides. And after that has been seared, we're going to add some beef stock. I used Better Than Bouillon and dissolved that into water. And we're going to pour that into the cast iron to get all of those seasonings off of the pan. And that's going to be our liquid for the crock pot. That way your chuck roast doesn't dry out. This next step is optional, but it's a great way to have your veggies cooked by the time dinner is ready. And that's by adding some vegetables to your crock pot. Today I'm adding carrots, and I'll also add some broccoli. I would suggest using green beans instead of broccoli. That way your whole house doesn't smell like broccoli the whole day. But it did turn out tasting delicious. It's not the prettiest meal. We also serve this with some homemade mashed potatoes, but you could put the potatoes in the crock pot as well to save you that prep time. Finally, here is how that roast chicken turned out. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I hope you feel inspired to make some delicious meals for you and your family this week.